Little boxes on the hillside, little boxes made of ticky-tacky, little boxes, little boxes, little boxes all the same. There's a green one and a pink one and a blue one and a yellow one, and they're all made out of ticky-tacky and they all look just the same. And the people in the houses all went to the university, and they all got put in boxes, little boxes all the same. And there's doctors and there's lawyers and business executives, and they all get put in boxes and they all come out the same. And they all play on the golf course and drink their martini dry, and they all have pretty children, and the children go to school, and the children go to summer camp, and then to the university, and they all get put in boxes and they all come out the same. And the boys go into business and marry and raise a family, and they all get put in boxes, little boxes all the same.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'll invite us to kind of just finish the last bit of our conversation and settle in. And if we don't know each other, my name is Lindsay. I have the joy of serving as pastor here at Christ Church United Methodist. I'm so glad that we're all here together today to remember and to celebrate the life of Bob Stiles. This is the most important thing you can be doing today. A life worth living is a life worth remembering, and this is how we make meaning out of loss. It's showing up in a space like this and giving thanks for what someone meant to us, for the ways in which the world is different, because Bob lived, right? And so I want to invite you as much as you can to be fully present here. That means you can actually turn this off. It turns the whole way off. You can do it. I invite you to do so. I invite you to think about turning off any electronics you have, with the important exception if it's medical equipment that you need, please leave that on. But otherwise, I just invite you to turn everything off and just be present here. If you haven't been in Christ Church before, our kitchen's in the back. We're going to have a time that we'll share food after the service. That'll be in the back. If you need a restroom, you can go down the halls. There are men's and women's restrooms. There's a non-gendered restroom down the hallway as well. And just to do what you need to throughout this time to feel comfortable and feel present here. Let's take a moment and breathe in and out. And we acknowledge that where we are now is the traditional land of the Southern Pomo people. So we give thanks for the privilege to be here. For those of us who are not invited here, we arrive with a spirit of repentance, with a desire to work for a world that is more just, and to work for love and peace on earth. I invite us to breathe in again and out. We'll begin our service today with these words from the philosopher and the monk Thich Nhat Hanh. People usually consider walking on water or in thin air to be a miracle. But I think the real miracle is not to walk either on water or in the air, but to walk on earth. Every day we are engaged in a miracle which we don't even recognize. A blue sky, white clouds, green leaves, the black, curious eyes of a child, our own two eyes. All of this is a miracle. We'll now hear from Bob's daughter, Sarah. We'll hear Bob's obituary.
kind of short, so I'm testing this. Thank you for being here. I hope you're all doing well today, and how fortunate we are to have this sunshine. And can you all hear me all right? All right, I'm going to read my father's obituary. Robert Miller Stiles. Bob Stiles, positive to the end, reluctantly left us on the evening of December 10th, 2023. Released from the intense suffering he endured battling cancer for 4 months. Bob Stiles, INTP, fanatical cyclist, guitarist, banjo player, singer, storyteller, teacher, intellect, creative, computer enthusiast, wordsmith, generator of nutty puns, and collector. Bob was a self-made, do-it-yourself, individualistic kind of guy who found pride in working on his bike or car. He enjoyed taking things apart and putting them back together, often not caring to use instructions, but to, quote, figure it out for himself, which sometimes led to breaking things, replacing parts, starting over, and or jerry-rigging something to work again. He had a determination to work through the process, even amongst great frustration. Bob was born in 1945 in Upland, California, to a couple who had come west from Iowa. His father had been a blue-collar worker in Iowa, making bricks and tiles in Des Moines. He moved out to work in the first Kaiser Steel factory in Fontana, California. And there Bob was conceived, born in the very first Kaiser Permanente. He grew up in Southern California, had a few years in college down there, and then transferred to Northern California and studied psychology at Sonoma State University. He went on to complete a teaching credential there and became a teacher for the rest of his life, most of the rest of his life. Bob had such an obsession with bicycles, one might have thought he'd die cycling. Also, I'll just interject real quickly that some of Bob's odd humor has definitely rubbed off on his kids, so that's woven in here a bit. Bob had such an obsession with bicycles, one might have thought he'd die cycling. His love started as a boy when he got his first Schwinn. He grew up to be an avid cyclist, track raced in college, and for some time worked in bike repair. Bob had a passion for putting together his own bikes from scratch, using all vintage parts and frames he painted himself. He immersed himself in a community of like-minded cycling enthusiasts, rode his bike to work most days, toured the entire Sonoma County and parts of the West Coast on his own 2 wheels. Cycling stories amounted, including a day he arrived home and went straight to the bathroom to remove a big beetle that had flown into his eye. That's one of my memories. Bob also accumulated a bike and bike parts collection. Bob had a great love for singing and telling stories with his guitar or banjo. Influenced by Appalachian and Irish folk music, blues, and the like, especially Bob Dylan, he'd learned to sing his favorite tunes, chords and fingerings on the guitar, or fine-tune his finger-picking on clawhammer banjo. During his early years of college, he sang bass in the choir and performed the role of the Mikado. Bob's love of music led to a massive vinyl, cassette tape, and CD collection, much of which lingered around after it went on to computer chip. There was always music in the house from dawn to dusk, everything from folk music to Bach cantatas. Bob ventured into making his own recordings, first by making his own recording studio, by hanging a blanket to block off the dining room where he recorded magnetic reel-to-reel tapes of himself singing and playing guitar or banjo, and much later evolved to recording to multi-track computer software and adding harmonica. Bob also collected many guitars and banjos among other instruments, and his final years included some experimental luthery. Bob was also a car enthusiast, always working on his own vehicles. After owning a number of Volkswagens, his final and favorite was the Karmann Ghia. This was in light of wishing for a, quote, bathtub, and some people know of bathtub as being an old-fashioned Porsche. I think there's some other connotations with it. Eventually, his dream did come true to own a Porsche, proudly mounted with a license plate that said Radfahrer, and excuse my German pronunciation if that wasn't quite right, which basically means bicycle rider in German. Mr. Stiles, quote, taught for over 30 years at the Rincon Valley Elementary School District, starting at Whited, moving to Madrone. Also, I forgot there was Sequoia in there, and then stayed with Village Elementary for many, many, many years, most of my growing up. Mr. Stiles' last chapter with Austin Creek Elementary, or was with Austin Creek Elementary School before retirement. Every day, Mr. Stiles rode his bike to work, taught all day, then rode home to take a nap, have a cup of coffee, and grade papers. While the endeavor was sometimes tiring, he found teaching to be meaningful, fulfilling, and fun. His favorite part was interacting with the students. I'll interject probably because he liked being a kid himself. Bob is survived by his eldest daughter, Sarah Stiles, me, daughter Clover Stiles, present, son-in-law Dustin, and grandson Zachary Stiles, son Nicholas Stiles, and grandsons Ace and Nicholas Stiles, older brother Gary Stiles, niece Kristen and her daughters, and nephews Mark and Greg. Bob was preceded in death by his parents, Niall Stiles and Helen Miller Stiles. Thank you. This is a poem from Mary Oliver, When Death Comes. When death comes,
like the hungry bear in autumn, when death comes and takes all the bright coins from his purse to buy me and snaps the purse shut. When death comes like the measle pox when death comes, like an iceberg between the shoulder blades, I want to step through the door full of curiosity, wondering, what is it going to be like in that cottage of darkness? And therefore I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood, and I look upon time as no more than an idea, and I consider eternity as another possibility, and I think of each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy, and as singular, and each name a comfortable music in the mouth, tending, as all music does, towards silence, and each body a lion of courage and something precious of the earth. When it's all over, I want to say that all my life I was a bride married to amazement. I was the bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I have made of my life something particular or real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of arguments. When it's all over, I don't want to end up simply having visited the world. We will now have the privilege of seeing this slideshow of Bob's life that Bob's family has put together. I'll invite Sarah to come forward if she wants to offer insight to the slideshow as we go along.
I'll just make a quick comment that collecting the photos, I had a few people send them to me, so thank you for sending them from bicycling trips. I had some of my own, and then I just tried to go through this huge trunk that actually my dad had refurbished himself again, and there were, let's just say, it was crazy making trying to get all the pictures together. No irradiated, evaporated milk. Something similar. That's him on the right. I really enjoy how my parents lived out of the box, getting married at home. I rode that one in the 1993 trip. Thank you again to the people who sent pictures.
So this will be the portion of our time together in which we'll take a moment and remember Bob together. So we're going to first hear from Sarah and Clover, and then after that time there'll be a little space for everyone to share. I'll bring a mic around at that point, and we'll take a moment to lift up some of our memories as well. But first we'll hear from Sarah and Clover.
Probably going to change the mood in here. It's going to be a little bit sad. So when you guys talk, you can lift it back up. I knew it was inevitable that this would happen, even though okay, even though it felt too soon, I think that I would feel that way at any age. I'm just, I have a cough drop in my mouth too. Hang on. All right. Wait. I'm just glad that he died before me and not the other way around. At times in my life, that was a strong possibility. I hate crying. Okay. He struggled with me and never gave up. He is responsible for saving my life twice. I don't know if I can do this. Okay, as a mother, I can only imagine, and I hope I never have to go through what he went through with me. If I could go back in time, I would tell him, if I could go back in time and talk to him and say one thing, I would say relax a little. I'm going to be okay. I adored my dad as a child. God, this sucks. I don't have Kleenex. Thank you. I'm wiping it on my sweater. Thank you. Thank you. I don't even know where I am now. Okay, this is funny. I got it right here. I adored my dad as a child, and when I got a little older, I thought he was a nerd. Then as an adult, we didn't share the same interests, but he was a very interesting person. If he found an interest in something, it became intense. And he had a lot of interests. He had books for every subject. They were hard to pack. That's supposed to be funny. My favorite memories with him were our family trips. I like to go to unique places, not the typical places. I miss his songs. I miss his quirky jokes. I miss his unconditional love. Okay, the last 3 months with him were challenging, but I enjoyed it too. I got to spend every day with him and return to him what he so freely gave to me my whole life. Thank you all so much for coming and loving him and us, and thank you all for coming. I already said that. Thank you, Sarah, for putting this together. I know that we're not always nice to each other, but I appreciate you doing all this work to put this together and making all this happen. So, thank you.
All right, so I was so busy pulling this together that a lot of my thoughts and reflections came at the last minute last night. Meanwhile, I have to they were coming to me before, all the while actually. So a little bit bit in contrast with Clover. I had a little bit of a different history with my dad. Being the eldest child, being the first, my dad and I turned out to be very alike. So a lot of my dad's interests, his way of thinking, was very influential on me. And in fact, it kind of fed me. It did feed me. And so here, those are some of my improvised words, but I'm going to just read a little bit of reflection. While my dad tended to be in his own world much of the time during my growing up, he had a very strong influence on me, not that he exactly intended to. My dad tended to have a live and let live philosophy in life and would always say, think for yourself. My dad preferred his independence and self-reliance, having his own thoughts for himself, and seemed to think his kids would or should have their own minds too. While this was great encouragement to be one's own self, to be unique, to be original, in some ways it was also an absence of guidance when perhaps needed. But I certainly enjoyed that as a teenager, especially once I began living at my dad's house. I didn't have to tell him where I was going and didn't have a curfew. I began engineering my life in the way that I wanted. Of course, he did care. With the package of independence also came a fondness of creativity and value on ingenuity. This attitude allowed me even more to delve into my creative and artistic sides. There was a day I remember, though, here's a funny little contradiction where my dad was waiting for me and we were going to go out the door somewhere, and I walk out and I'm wearing cut-off shorts with drawings all over them. Underneath the cut-off shorts, I have orange tights and then black ripped-up fishnets over them, and then a really nice velvet jacket and a hat, an old vintage hat. And I walk out the door, and my dad looks me up and down and says, "You're going to wear that?" And being like him, a mind of my own, I look at him kind of confused. I'm like, this is my rebellious dad telling me this? And I look at him and I say, yes. Well, there wasn't much he could do, and we had to get somewhere, so he just had to hang out with his weird-looking daughter. So in parallel with my dad, I've become a musician. I like the outdoors. Philosophy and psychology are interesting to me. I became a composer, and he thought that was really cool because I was making up my own thing. And he ended up being one of my top fans for a while, which in a way got a little weird sometimes. But I think it was nice that there was that support. I didn't really get into cycling so much. That was something that he was really encouraging. I tried, and then I almost lost my life a couple times. I'm exaggerating, but there were a few scary situations. So I decided that I was just going to get a little cruiser. I now live in Washington State, in Olympia, and I've done a bit of road trips like my dad, and going back or up and down the Oregon coast. There's a lot of memories come back from the 1993 gourmet bicycle trip that he was my first one that I went on that he invited me to. And there's a particular lake that every time I go by it, I think of my dad. And it's called Lake Takanich. And I remember that was a point where I was kind of lagging behind everyone, and I saw my dad there sitting on the side of the road next to the lake, and my dad's like, "How are you doing?" And I was like, he's like, come take a break with me. So I sat there, and we were eating lunch, and my dad said, "This is where you're going to talk and itch, Lake Takanich." He always had those like weird puns that I was like, God, Dad. So every time I go by that lake, I think of my dad. I think of that moment, and I think of that sun and that air, and now when I go by that lake, I think my dad's here right now, and he's going to be here forever. Talking and itching.
So we breathe in together with for what it's worth, Clover and Sarah. I think this is the exact tension that we hold when we remember someone we love, which is joy and hopefully humor. I know when I'm dead and someone's having a service for me, I want it to be kind of rip-roaring, right? You should have that, because that's a sign that someone was alive, was truly alive with you. And then, of course, there's grief, because there's a hole that remains. And so I think however we show up to remember someone we love, that's the appropriate stance to take, whether it's joy and gratitude and humor and being grateful, or whether it's sorrow and grief and loss. All of these things honor the memory of someone who's gone before us. So let's just take a moment and breathe in together. Let's just say, everyone together, we give thanks for Bob. We give thanks for Bob. You can do it better. We give thanks for Bob. We're going to take a moment now, and for other folks might have memories or stories they want to share as well. I'll invite you to consider if you want to share just a brief story, a couple of sentences, some words about who Bob was. For you, I'll bring the mic around, and then after each one we hear, we'll say together, we give thanks for Bob. So let's practice that again. We give thanks for Bob.
Hey there, my name's Kristen Stiles. Bob is my uncle.
Oh, you need to.
So the memory that I remember meeting him, I was pregnant, my husband and I drove up from Palm Springs, and we came up to visit, and Clover and Sarah and Nick were all very small. And it was after an earthquake. It was one of the bigger earthquakes back in early 90s. Yeah, and we were here. Yeah, it was huge. We made tamales. We probably spent $100 on all the ingredients to make tamales, and we had everything everywhere. It was one big family participation event, and they were terrible. But it was really fun doing it. It was really fun. That's what we established. And then the last time we were here and visited was when Zach turned 1 year old, and there was a big gathering, and probably some of you were there as well too. And it was nice to see him then and there, and here we are again. So anyway, glad to be here. You remember any good? Yeah.
And we say together, we give thanks for Bob.
We give thanks.
Go, Vin.
I'm Vin Hoagland, and I knew Bob from bike riding, and in fact, he gave me this shirt because I grew up outside of Boston and have, for my lifetime, been a Red Sox fan. And I rode with Bob a lot on the gourmet trips. I never rode with him around here, but I remember frequently he had sew-up tires. And a couple of times he had flats, and it takes a while to repair the sew-up tire, and I was with him for that. And then there was another time, and I can't remember exactly where, that one of the things that we did at the end of each trip was to have a party, or sorry, we'd always have a party, and at the beginning of the trip, you would draw names, and you had somebody that you were supposed to get a gift of some sort for. And I can't remember why this came up, but he was riding ahead of me, and I happened to see this teddy bear on the side of the road, a little teddy bear. And it was perfect, and I can't remember exactly why that was so perfect for that particular present. But, oh, I see people remembering that.
It was a little dog with big floppy ears, and he put batteries in it, and it worked, and it would go back and forth like this, and the ears would go back and forth, and this was his gift, I guess, for you. Yeah, yeah, and it was so funny.
Go ahead, keep going.
Let's say together, we give thanks for Bob.
Bicycle trips. I was riding my first time down the coast, and I was a little nervous because we were coming up to the Devil's Slide, and I'm riding next to Bob, and I said, Bob, I heard the tunnel's tight and dark, and then you come out in this bright sunshine, and then you got nothing to your right. And he goes, that's right, Frank. He says, just remember, if the car gets too close, grab the mirror and then the windshield wiper and hang on. He says, because the option is it's 100 feet down. It's not gonna be a bad fall, but the stop's gonna be one hell of an adventure.
We say together, we give thanks for Bob.
Well, Bob was in my life because we taught school together for many years. He was my teaching partner. And all in all, he was one of the most interesting, he was the most intelligent person that you could ever be around if you could take the idiosyncrasies along with the good part. He loved his job. He loved every child that ever walked into his classroom. He was a punter. He never cleaned up the kitchen in the teacher's room or his junk in the refrigerator, and we were lucky if he showed up for his time to be on yard duty. But all in all, I've watched the kids be born, and
Gotta get up closer to you.
and they're beautiful. It's great to see your family, and your dad would be so proud of you. Applause to them.
We say together, we give thanks for Bob. Others.
Another bicycle trip story. Riding down, where did you say, Frank? Down that highway. And along that highway. And I think that went off.
We didn't hear the echo anymore.
Yeah. Okay, we were riding down Highway 1. And when you drive down Highway 1, you see concrete bunkers up along part of the highway. And in a car, you can't stop. But on a bicycle, we could. So a group of us stopped and could go over the side, and we walked up the dirt path to see what was in the bunker. And apparently they were left from one of the world wars. But that evening after dinner, we were sitting around, and Bob says, hey, I've got a story to tell you guys. Well, I'll tell you, this story went on and on and on and on, and we were about ready to fall asleep because he's telling a story about a little man that somehow had something to do with these bunkers. And then a big storm came up, and there was thunder and lightning, and the strange thing about this little man that came down from the bunker was he had a screw in his belly. And when the thunder and lightning came, and understand this story's probably been going on 10 minutes anyway, we're kind of falling asleep. Anyway, a strike of lightning comes, hits the screw on the little man's belly, and this little screw starts unwinding. And suddenly we're paying attention again. And he says, and then his butt fell off.
Well, we give thanks for Bob. All stories are true from a certain point of view.
I'm one of Bob's neighbors, and he was a really special guy. Some of my favorite memories are of him sitting in our quad on the grass on this big purple blanket that always had an oil stain on it. And he'd take off the 12 strings on his 12-string guitar, and he'd be talking to himself and talking to his cats. And my daughter would run around in the quad with the bubbles, and he was just, it was like paradise in this small little community that we've created. And he told some really dirty jokes that I really love.
We give thanks for Bob. This is getting more and more interesting. All right, let's do it.
Okay, I'm another neighbor, and I just feel privileged that I got to meet him and his family and to help. And I am going to miss him. I would open my windows when he sat in the quad because we were right in the perfect, I could see him, I can hear him. We opened the windows and he would sing. And it would happen about this time of year, and I miss it so much. And I didn't get to know him very long, but I am so privileged that I met him, Clover. He was wonderful and funny. He was funny. And the dirty jokes. I remember those now. I remember. So, and I miss him. I miss the lights he used to do for the kids, the Christmas lights. That was a real big thing for me, and his singing. So, and I'm so amazed about the riding of his bikes, how much he did. I didn't know he did all that. But I remember seeing he had a lot of bikes in that little house. So, okay.
Yeah, I'm another neighbor, and he was always so kind to me and special and funny. I was on disability for a while, so when all this was going on, when he wasn't feeling well, I used to go over and, spend some time with him when he was in the house and check on him. And he would always call me his helicopter. His helicopter is landing. Here's Sherry. And it made me laugh. He was kind to my dogs, and my dogs are very skittish, but he was one of the only neighbors that my dogs would actually go up to. And when one of my dogs, named Yoda Wee, when he would be playing his music in the quad, she would lay down and sit there and not want to go into the house. And my other dog is really skittish, but he was able to go up and pet him, and he wouldn't run away.
But he got to meet Putt. We had a dog.
And then we also had a dog, named Putt, but
And he loved him.
he was one of the first neighbors that we met when we moved there in 2019, and he was very special, just made me laugh and just made me feel real comfortable when we moved there, and
I loved his house.
I miss him, and I miss his music, I miss his jokes, I just miss everything about him, and I love him so much.
We give thanks for Bob.
We give thanks.
I'm Dave Allen. Always really enjoyed having Bob on our bike trips for several reasons. He's a good friend. He's a good rider. I loved riding with him, and loved playing music with him after dinner and the campfires, and we had a lot of good times there. There's one time then we were riding. We both ride sew-ups. And so we have to be careful with where we go with our tires. And so he was right behind me this time, and we came on a few rocks, and I missed the rocks, and I led him right over one of the rocks, and it blew his tire. And I know I already apologized to him, but I want to apologize again, Bob.
Say, we're sorry, Bob.
I don't like speaking in public, but I was also a neighbor of Bob's, also part-time tenant, I would say. We lived next door when Clover and I were teenagers. My mom lived next door to him, and Clover and I were in and out of each other's houses freely, which probably drove both of our parents crazy. But I just, we're saying I give thanks to Bob, and I do. I ate so much of his food. He put up with me as a teenager. Clover and I were pretty wild back then. So there's just a lot of good memories in that complex and of that time and of Bob in general. So I give thanks to Bob today.
We say we give thanks for Bob. Let's take a moment and breathe in and out. Let's just hold everything that we heard here. I'll invite us to reflect in a spirit of gratitude as we hear more music from Dave Allen. Right, so following we're nearing the conclusion of our time together, and there'll be a time for food. If other people brought instruments, we can play Puff the Magic Dragon and other church-appropriate songs here in this space. That's not the strangest song I've heard played here. That's totally fine. Like, it's all good. So we'll have time for that afterwards, and thanks to folks who thought to bring food. I want to thank the tech team for running the technology today, and I want to thank Irene Palmier for setting up the tea and the coffee as well. At the end of a life, or at the end of a memorial service, I think sometimes it's important for us to take a moment and make meaning out of what we have just experienced, to make meaning out of what loss means for us, to make meaning out of what it is for the world to continue on after someone has passed. I really appreciated the reflection about, this would be the time of year that you would hear music on the quad, right? And that music isn't there now in the same way. Like, the world is fundamentally different when we lose someone, and it can be as profound as the loss of a father or a grandfather or an uncle, a family member. It's also a profound loss when we lose a friend and we lose a neighbor, right? And so what does it mean in the end for that person to be gone? The way I look at the world, the way I believe, is that the last gift that someone gives us is they give us the space that they leave behind. So if someone loomed large in our lives and was a large presence in our lives, there's often this big space at the end, and you kind of wonder, what do you do with it, right? I don't know, I know very little about science, but I've heard someone say once that nature abhors a vacuum, right? And so that if there's a space in our life, we can make a choice that to fill that space, right? I love how much we've heard about Bob's sense of humor. The great thing about a bad joke is that it gets worse each time you share it. You could share those jokes again and again, and they just get older and worse. And if I know anything about humor, it's when it's bad and you double down on it, that's when it gets to its sweet spot. So I would just say that's a gift that'll keep on giving generations to generations. It's a bad joke. Curiosity, the kind of mind that would take something apart just to put it back together. I don't know about you, but I want to live as a more curious person. I've heard that you can't be curious and judgmental at the same time. And in a world that's full of judgmental people, I want to be someone who's more curious, right? That's something, right, that it seems intrinsic to who Bob was. That's something each of us can do more and do better, right? Lead with curiosity, not just about how things work, but about why people are, about why people are doing what they're doing, about why somebody said what they said, instead of rushing to judgment, assuming we know their state of mind. I also think there's something to be said about each one of us can be more creative, right? Someone who is a musician, someone who is bringing people together, someone who is thinking about the world differently. We can do that too. Each person can be a musician. You actually don't need to have gifts to make music. You just need to have the capacity to make noise. And then music is in the eye of the beholder, or the ear, I guess, right? Any person can make music, and any music can be beautiful, depending on the intention and the person making it and listening. I hope that in this next season, other people make music in that quad. I hope that other people make bad jokes, even dirty ones, if it's okay and it feels safe to everybody. And I hope that other people show up to be creative, and those other people are us, right? And so as we go forth from this space, I just want to give thanks for everything all of you shared today about a full and beautiful life, full of creativity and lack of concern about the the school kitchen, that's fine, right? It's a whole person. And I want to give thanks for each of you showing up and being vulnerable in this way, and give thanks for the ways in which Bob was vulnerable and open and was making connections and loving people. And so I'll invite you to stick around afterwards. We can continue to share stories together. Let's share food. That's always the right thing to do after a memorial service. Is you've done emotionally heavy lifting, like carb up. So I'd invite you to eat, to spend some time together over the tea and the coffee. If people want to make music, that's fine too. But as we conclude this time together, let's just breathe in again and out. And in lots of religious traditions around the world, at the end of a time of remembering, people commend a spirit back to where it came from. So we commend Bob back to his maker. We commend him to a space of peace and comfort. And I always invite folks as we commend a spirit to return home, feel free to keep a portion of it for yourself. Keep the joy and the creativity, always the love that you knew through Bob. Remember that these gifts are meant to be shared. And so let us go forth as people who are curious and creative and loving to one another. Amen. All right. Thanks for being here. Yeah.
Can I say something really quick? I just remembered we have a recording of our dad playing a song. So feel free to mingle, and thank you. I hope you can hear me. It's not gone.
There we go. I just wanted to say that we'll carry on. One of the first songs that I'm going to have played is actually him singing. We have a recording. So I'm going to try to get that going. Yeah. Thank you. In the meantime, feel free to get up, to mingle, and to help yourself to some food.